And so Riot Forge released another banger. To be exact, fourth one in a row. After Hextech Mayhem, Ruined King and the Mage Seeker, we got Convergence, a game that's based around the story of Echo. Someone who not only has a great story in the core universe, but someone who also got a great spotlight in Arcane, which certainly made some people hyped. But on top of Convergence being just a great game, it also confirmed a big theory that was always hovering around League's universe. So today, not only will we review the game in general, and not only will we talk about how good the story of Convergence is, but at the end of the video we will also dive into some spoilers. Because this game pulled off one of the biggest story twists yet. So strap up and get ready for a wild ride through time. From the beginning I knew I would be a bit biased towards this game. I love indie games and I love platformers. So after I learned that the Double Stallion was working on this, I knew I would like it. Which is exactly what happened. Convergence is an action platformer with quite a few unique twists. And the first twist comes from the combat. On top of Echo having your standard health bar, he also has the ability to rewind time. This rewind ability has its own bar, which essentially behaves as your second health bar. Because every time you get hit, you can decide to tap into this energy and recall back, to regain the lost health and give you the ability to avoid the damage. In practice, this ability is as fun to use as it sounds. Every time you take a hit, as long as you know where it came from, you recall back to a previous moment with the knowledge that the attack is going to come, which gives you a chance to dodge it like some kind of a superhero. Which is why, every now and then, this game may also turn into a bullet hell. Because with these powers, it is fun to try to dodge everything. I have to say, this game sells you the fantasy of time rewinding really well. Besides this, the combat itself gives you a nice toolkit to have fun beating enemies. You can throw your Time Winder at enemies that comes back to you, just like you can in League. You can spawn a slowing field, just like you can in League. You can phase dive, which means you blink to an enemy to smack them, just like you can in League. And after charging up your ultimate, you have an ultimate, just like you do in League. The moveset certainly feels great, and you can make it even better by spending all the currency you got from beating people to unlock even more moves, such as the platformer classic Ground Pound. But on top of that, as you beat more unique enemies, you get rewarded with special crafting material, which you can use to build gadgets, which you put into your limited inventory slots, which customize your build even more. And these gadgets give you more abilities, such as hitting your Time Winder so it flies even further, or giving you a spin attack on your jumps similar to what you can see in Metroid games. Speaking of which, yes, Convergence is also a really awesome Metrovania, which I didn't expect. Although it is still a very linear game, it gives you the semi-open world feeling that is essential for any Metrovania game. You travel somewhere, you notice that there is an obstacle which you can't get through, only to later get a new ability such as a double jump or a mid-air dash that allow you to reach those blocked off areas. If you're a fan of any Metroid game or even the modern iterations such as Hollow Knight, this game will make them proud. Connected to this, all of these abilities are also used for parkour. Dashing and double jumping aside, you can also grab onto poles that make you jump higher. And later you even get some special abilities such as wall running or grinding on rails. On top of that, you can also use the time freeze to freeze fire to prevent it from hurting you, or you can freeze platforms to prevent them from falling. And you can also phase dive through walls. And you can use your Time Winder as a key to build more platforms. If you combine all of these together, you get some really cool platforming that can rival some rage games such as Super Meat Boy. And you can especially notice how great this running is during some of the special challenge tracks, which make you combine all of this into one flawless run as you chase a robot through zone. But keep in mind that the challenge actually scales with difficulty. That's right, on top of the difficulty making enemies more aggressive and making them deal more damage as well as reducing your own health, playing on higher difficulty will also take away some of the platforms, which is an interesting take on difficulty scaling in general. And of course, yes, I played on insane difficulty because it perfectly describes who I am. And I can confirm, on the hardest difficulty, you get some really satisfying challenges. So overall, both on the combat front and when it comes to the parkour, this game is really good. But unfortunately, it still didn't get through without some issues. Besides some minor graphical imperfections with the textures, there were a few things that pushed this game down a little bit for me. First of all, if you wanna do any parkour whatsoever, you have to press a separate button for it. Perhaps it is better with a controller, but I played on a keyboard. But I can tell you that having to press control every time you wanna grab onto something, wall run or even slide, it is a bit counterintuitive on top of also pressing space to jump and shift to dash. It would be a lot better if all the parkour interactions were built into the jump itself, which is what other platformers are doing. So you can press a single button that does it all depending on where you are. The game still works with a bit more complex controls, but sometimes the controls can get frustrating. This especially happens when you are midair and you want to time freeze something. To time freeze, you have to press Q and then navigate wherever you wanna put it. And let me tell you, pressing WASD while also holding Q is not fun. I also noticed a bug where after you grab onto a slide, if you try to change directions too quickly, the input gets ignored, which killed me quite often. But also there is one more issue that is going to annoy a lot of people. For the majority of the game, the camera follows you around, but then sometimes it cleverly adapts to look in front of you when it comes to the parkour sections. This is all great until you get to a part where a parkour section is overlapping a combat section. And if you stay around the border between the two, the camera will freak out because it will not know what it's supposed to be focusing on. But all in all of these are just minor issues, and they don't really bite into the overall rating of the game. Which means now it's time to talk about the story. Before we tackle the big elephant in the room, which is the story of this game, let's first talk about the background lore. As is the norm for Riot Forge games, a lot of the lore comes from the collectibles. Be it notes, enemy journals, location landmarks, or here even craftable items and little toys crafted by Oriana's father. Yes, Corinne Revec is in this game. And I think it's safe to say that if you're a fan of the League of Legends lore, you will find a lot of Easter eggs around. But even if you don't know much about League, you will still enjoy the story of this game, because they kept it simple and great. The main story of this game revolves around a new material. Yes, I know that Zone already has issues with Hextech, Chemtech and Shimmer, but this game also throws in the Syntixi crystals. These are essentially jacked up Hextech gems that are also highly unstable, far more than Chemtech. Without any major spoilers, the story is very simple. There is a Chem Baron family that has a Syntixi crystal factory. At first, things don't seem to be that bad until you meet a mysterious figure. And it is revealed that they are Echo from the future, who tells you that these Zonite Syntixi crystals start a war with Piltover and their Hextech, which turns Piltover and Zone into a Fallout-like hellscape. So obviously your goal is to collect these crystals and put them into a safe space, to save the future. And along the way you are going to meet some familiar faces, such as Jinx, Camille, Warwick, and also people like Corina Veraza. That's right, even though they can't shove too many champions into this game because of limitations, they still use clever tricks to give this game as many cameos as possible. Which means that even Corina Veraza appears in this game as a talking silhouette. And overall, I have to say, the story is simply good. There are no real downsides to any of it. It is very well paced, it has great turns, and as I mentioned, it is easy and simple to understand. So before we jump into the spoilery part, if I had to wrap all of this together with the combat and the parkour and give it a score, to a casual gamer who is looking for a game to enjoy, this is an easy 8 out of 10. However, if you like Metrovanias, or if you are a fan of League's lore, especially anything around Echo or Jinx, this is definitely bumped up to 9 out of 10 because you can get more out of this. And if you look around the internet, you may notice that most people agree with this, as this game is getting an average score of 80, while also reaching 90% positive feedback on Steam. So honestly, if you haven't played this game yet, you should give it a try. I doubt you'll regret it. But now, it's time. It's time we talk about the biggest lore twist this game pulled off, which is the ending. Which also means it's time to talk about spoilers. You see, near the end of the game, you learn that Future Echo had a plan on how to get rid of the Syntyxi crystals. He wanted to detonate them near the Piltover Hextech vaults, which would remove the war supplies for both cities, effectively preventing the war. However, this meant that there would also be a lot of casualties. So present Echo decided to fight him, and after beating him, Future Echo resorted to plan B, which is creating a time rift, sending the Syntyxi crystals through it to drift through time, but also jumping after it so he could seal the time rift from the inside, which essentially meant he also had to sacrifice himself. So, that's what he did. And he rode the Syntyxi crystals to the end of time. Literally. Where he left it to drift away, hopefully not ending up in another timeline. Then there is a somewhat confusing scene, where you can see the Future Echo not really doing anything, but then you can see another hand activating one of the Z drives, which kind of makes me think that maybe another version of Echo actually sent him back one of the chrono batteries. Anyway, the point of the scene is that Future Echo has one last battery, and he used it to open a gate and arrive at his final destination, which was a future timeline where his parents were happy. But before he picked that future, we can see this. To many, this may be just a random reference to all the skins League of Legends has. But to others, this confirms a theory that has been floating around for quite some time. The theory that everything is canon. Not in their little pocket universes, but it's all canon in the core universe of League of Legends. Because now we know that League of Legends is a multiverse. In the past, Riot actually teased this twice. First time this happened is when Pulsefire Ezreal got his update. And if you go many years back, you might actually find a video on my channel talking about this. Essentially, we learned that Pulsefire Ezreal had the ability to jump between universes. So he was able to see the Project universe, the Star Guardian universe, and so on. And the others, such as Pulsefire Caitlyn or the Praetorian bots, were trying to stop him because making time paradoxes was illegal. But on his journeys, Ezreal also saw a universe with stags and owl beasts, which was very similar to the canon League universe. Though it was never confirmed, that's what it was. Then, during Odyssey, we learned that Odyssey Kayn was holding the scythe Rast, who actually traveled to the Odyssey universe from the Darkstar universe. So when Odyssey Kayn turns into Rast, it is actually Darkstar Rast. Anyway, that confirmed that there were certain skin lines that were connected, and they were all part of the same multiverse. But then, for the first time, Convergence confirmed that the canon core universe is also part of all of this, which opened the door to a lot of new possibilities. And yes, remember that Arcane also has a different story from the core universe. I have a whole separate video about that, but that's the reason why you also saw Arcane in some of the visions. Now, I strongly doubt that any of this is actually going to affect how League's lore is going out. But it definitely means that if Pulsefire Ezreal suddenly jumps into Noxus out of nowhere, it's not gonna be unheard of. And when it comes to interacting with this from the other side, it's only really Echo or Zillion who can interact with it. So realistically, I don't think any of this is actually going to affect the lore. At least, unless Riot is using this as a setup for the future. What this does mean, however, is that all the lore of all the skin lines is suddenly a bit more relevant. All the old gods and all the demons from the High Noon. Even what's happening in the Star Guardian universe is a bit more interesting now. because there is a really tiny chance the universes might interact with each other. And if it happens, just pray there is not a Space Groove crossover, because things are gonna get weird.